Our passage today in John chapter 19, verses 14 through 16, records the actual moment where Christ was handed over to be crucified. This is Pilate doing this. It says in 19, verse 14, it says, "It was the day of preparation of Passover week, about the 6th hour. 'Here is your king,' Pilate said to the Jews. And they shouted, 'Take him away, crucify him.' 'Shall I crucify your king?' Pilate asked. And they said, 'We have no king but Caesar.'" You know, how far had the Israelites fallen? They had been a nation that was called out under the kingship of God Himself, and now they were calling Caesar, really a foreign king, their king. If you watch this passage, you really need to keep all of the scriptures in context here, because it appears in this passage that man is the one doing this. And in a sense he was, but if you follow the scriptures as a whole, you recognize that this day, the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, was a day that God had been preparing since the creation of the world. We know in Genesis 3:15 that God had already told us that Satan was going to bruise the heels of Christ, and that was part of the crucifixion. So this day had been foretold. As a matter of fact, in Peter's sermon right after the ascension of Christ, he says this. He says, "Men of Israel, listen to this. Jesus of Nazareth was a man accredited to you by God through miracles, wonders, and signs, which God did among you, as you yourselves know. This man was handed over to you by God's set purpose and foreknowledge, and you, with the help of wicked men, put him to death by nailing him to the cross." What you see here is really the two-part responsibility of the crucifixion of Christ. Number one, it was us. It was man who nailed the nails. But if you follow Acts 2 and the rest of the Scriptures, you find out that it was God who had predetermined. It was God who had predestined this moment. He did this for the salvation of His people. So although you and I bear the guilt of the death of Jesus Christ, it was God's perfect plan that put it in order. Why? Well, because in the garden, when Adam and Eve sinned, all of mankind were condemned to death from that day forward, and they were now spiritually dead. And this was God's design plan, and this was God's design day, the day that He would allow His Son to receive the brunt of His wrath for our sin, so that through faith in His finished work, we might be freed from our sins, so that we may walk in newness of life. So we need to thank God today that although He could have condemned us all to hell, because there's none righteous, no, not even one, and all of our good deeds are nothing but filthy rags in the eyes of God, but because of His grace and mercy, He offered Christ as our sacrifice.